Welcome on back, nerds and not so nerds. Let's go ahead and look at some battle writing and how we can get your choreography for your characters looking so realistic they'll think that somebody who actually knows stage combat wrote it. 5 tips coming at you. Let's jam. Welcome on back, everybody. My name is Jenna O'Malley. I am your soul writer, author of sci-fi fantasy with dashes of romance and nerdy references, alongside the raw healing stories my characters in the Myrna Annals. You can kind of see the covers up there, I guess. Weave throughout time and space. I do help other soul bards to rock things out with their own characters and stories from the soul in their pace, in their time, in their stride. Let's go ahead and look at those 5 tips that I think could help anybody to write a better battle scene. Doesn't matter how nerdy you are, doesn't matter how well you know TTRPGs, tabletop RPGs, video games, or anything of that like that requires this kind of character generation and tracking. So first of those 5 tips, I'm actually going to be approaching this from like my theater background. Little heads up, my bachelor degree studies included being a stage manager for theater as one of my minors, and as part of that, I got certified to do stage combat. Yes, I'm that nerd. I legit took a college class to teach me how to safely fight and punch people and do whatnots with swords and stuff. It was so much fun. But that class more so taught me the importance of a couple of things as a writer, as far as like the choreography literally matters. My stage combat professor at the time when I was going to Frostburg State University, Daryl Rushton, he used to say, Jenna, you're the English major here among all of the other theater minors in this class. What is the action part of the sentence? Duh, the verbs, Daryl, why? That's literally where you take your cues, sometimes as an actor, depending on what kind of plays you're doing. For example, in Shakespeare, there's little to no stage directions in Shakespeare. So literally the character's dialogue sometimes tells you what they're doing. So therefore, how can you use verbs in your narration and in your dialogue as a writer? Strong verbs, specific verbs, not a lot of was's, is's, amses, gotses, okay? If you could remove to have and to be verbs and swap them out for a stronger verb, you probably just did your whole battle scene a huge bonus service. Therefore, the way the people in the scene interact matters so much. You're not just looking at how the verbs gear people to act, but also to either react or respond. There is a big difference. Reactions are normally instinctual. You could also include things like muscle memory. I'm talking about our sword fighters here. There's a certain part of it has to be reactive, depending on if your enemy parries, thrusts, cleaves, things of that nature. You really need to have some sort of natural muscle bound train reaction, but a difference on the other end of that coin is going to be a response. Okay, this could be the choice to fall back. This could be the choice to use a magic or a heal or something else in the stack that is not muscle bound. Okay, if you're thinking of things in, I'll go into this example further down a little bit more detail, but if you're thinking of things like in a turn-based RPG or in a TTRPG, where you have choices to make for every action or reaction, you sometimes need to pause and go, do I need a diplomatic choice here? Do I need what other factors are in play that just aren't, bash with the sword, punch, kick, punch and kick, because that can sometimes be a battle, but they go so much deeper when you look at more than just how people are reacting to each other. Therefore, on the response side, things like eye contact matter so much more. Now, in a stage combat scenario, eye contact is like your number one safety communication tool. You may not even see it from the audience's point of view, but a lot of times if you have someone who's playing a smack, normally you need to at some point agree, when do we make eye contact to agree we're about to connect? So the way it was always taught to me by Daryl was, if you're open-handed smacking, for example, if you're open-handed smacking someone, this is when you make eye contact. Notice I haven't even started doing this yet. Step number 1 is eye contact, normally for safety reasons. So in a real battle, when are they making eye contact with the enemy or with their friend or with a bystander? And therefore, tip number 2, this leads you to be more mindful of whether or not you're repeating things, and whether or not, if you're using 2 hands to punch, oh, wait a minute, where's that third arm with the sword coming from, Ian Sinclair? Anyway, so this is where I definitely suggest checking an older video of mine on a battle writing demo that's very basic, boiled down what I mentioned of earlier, TTRPG or role-playing games that you remember, like early Final Fantasy, Legend of Dragoon, Secret of Mana, those Japanese text-based RPGs that are turn-based. Those things are so cool. Now, Baka and I are talking about a couple of these same things on occasion with building the mechanics for the Myrna Annals TTRPG a couple of Thursday nights a month. So if you want to hear a definite deep dive on how to use those kind of mechanics for your writing benefit, go ahead. But for a short recap, look at what your characters are doing. Kind of like a chess player would. A couple of moves behind and a couple of moves ahead. Who is where on your playing field? Who is out of commission because they're injured or simply because they're occupied with another group? This also leads you to not only avoid things like so-and-so has too many limbs, or even more so, helping to avoid that whole using the same verbs again and again and again and again so that they're doing the same action on repeat. It also makes you realize, hey, so-and-so doesn't get as much battle screen time with this character. How cool would it be if I paired them together for once? This is something that I explored deeply with Ian in books 1 and 2 as he's learning how to fight as part of the Myrna structure, being a human who eventually is turned into a vampire and rising through their ranks. He learns quick that to fight with Harumi is completely different than to fight next to another bard, Rochelle. They are both weapon-wielding bards. So in like a Dungeons and Dragons TTRPG Pathfinder-y sense, they're multi-classing here. They have a couple of skills in the singing and a couple of skills in their weapons, but neither of the ladies use the same weapons, nor do they know the same songs. That makes Ian's interaction with them completely different. Harumi is a dual-wielding, roguish type sword fighter. She deals DPS, damage per second. Rochelle is a little bit more of a tank. She wears heavy armor for a reason, as opposed to Harumi, who wears lighter armor for a reason. Yes, this stuff matters for your character's movement, too. Rochelle's going to not move nearly as fast across the field as Harumi because armor. Also because different methods of singing. Rochelle is trained in almost like operatic singing, whereas Harumi is trained in like chanting. Oh, they are powerful sets of singing and 2 completely different techniques. Therefore, their battle songs are going to have different effects. So these are things where you get looking into what's going on around the character that you're in the perspective of to see who can help them do a stronger attack, do a more complex battle maneuver. This is literally where you start thinking of things like a chess game or a checkers game, or even a former student of mine when I was teaching creative writing in high school and gave this comparison. He was a football player. He said, this is literally what we do whenever we look at game footage. I said, bingo. This is your game footage day. What are your characters doing? Who's fighting with whom? And are you giving them new chances to build skills by working with different people that play off of each other's weaknesses and strengths? Tip number 3. Yes, tip number 2 took a little while. Totally worth it. Tip number 3. It's not just also what goes on physically. We've talked a lot about physics and how the world and the character and the characters on the field and on the chessboard have an effect on each other. Because if you think about chess, it's literally a give and a take, a tug and a pull, a back and a forth, okay? You're also looking at the really stanky, gross onion layers that no one wants to talk about. We're going to look at some Aristotle here, just like you would with a romantic couple going on a date. What's going on to charge different facets of the situation? Normally in Aristotle, he would say all arguments need these things. I'm venturing to say a battle scene probably needs these too for argument's sake. What's the logic? This is the who, what, when, where, how, and why of the situation of who's even in this battle. Okay, so who's injured? Who's not able to do what? What are the, as Baca kind of calls them, what's the entropy? What is the situation going against you statistically going into this battle here? Okay? Also, the pathos. I like to call this the pathology of emotion to kind of help get that E separation there from ethos, which is ethics. We'll talk about that next. So if logos is the tip of the iceberg, then pathos is going to be the chunky middle of the iceberg that you probably are really seeing very, very tiny little bits at the top in with the tip of it. But most of it you're not seeing because it's all in the person's head. And you cannot know another character's emotions if you're not in their head, no head hopping. So that way, this gives a chance for people to say stuff they would not normally say in a high stress pressured situation. This is one of those moments where Ian Sinclair literally looks at his new friends and says, "Why are we running everywhere?" in the middle of a battle. Now, mind you, he's not talking just about the battle. They've been running the whole battle. They've been running for 2 whole books. It's a J.R.R. Tolkien joke. They walked everywhere, my characters run everywhere, right? Right. So I had to build that joke in there somewhere, and the funniest place to put it was the most stressful moment when the audience and the characters needed a moment to literally laugh for the sake of breath. Humor is so important, and we're going to talk about humor being a pillar here in a little bit. So, what are the emotions at play here? Therefore, also, the very bottom of that iceberg, probably the heaviest parts of it. What are the ethics and the morals that are being tested? What are the extreme motives, as Abby Amians would call them, the disbeliefs of the world that are getting flipped on their twisted Sunday sides, you know? Let's go ahead here and definitely notice that this is where cycles of breakthrough or cycles of repeat can occur in a character's arc of development and learning to become a better being. Okay? This is the meat and potatoes of where your character can get juicy relatable in the middle of a battle. This is why people don't like me with things that happened to a certain sibling of Ian's in book 2 or 3. I think it's book 3. Yeah, some people don't like me for how things go down with Ronan. It was literally... Ian was backed into a corner. He had a choice. And he leaned too heavy into reaction instead of response. And that kind of made things not go very nice for Big Brother. So look at how, again, this can cause breakthrough or breakdown for your characters. We're going to talk about breakdown big time here in a bit. So a battle scene number 4, therefore, feels like a roller coaster. One of my first editors I ever had for book 1, way back when in the early days, said, "You are really good at giving pillars to anchor either side of a battle scene, kind of like how a lot of romance authors will with their battle scene in the sheets, not the streets, we should say. We'll leave it that way. So with that being kind of my emotional overlay, here's what I mean. Use your logic, your ethics, your emotion, your belief, your disbelief, your response, your reaction choices to be what pins down the start and the end of the battle. Normally, those are your most emotionally charged moments because readers and the character know this is my last chance to breathe when we start. That's why humor works here, because literally when you're laughing, you're breathing deeper physically. Yes, a well-timed joke is purposeful to make sure you readers are breathing. It also can do the same thing on the other end, okay? This is why at the end of Ian's first battle scene, he and Frey are literally laying on the ground, looking up at the night sky, gasping for air, going, oh my god, that was intense. And Ian's going, there's no turning back for me now. And Frey's like, that's okay, we've adopted you already, get over it. Slight chuckle. You know, this is one of those moments where you can really, really bring us back to reality. Think about it. For those of you who have been on roller coasters, how does it feel prior to the ride starting as you're not standing in line for the ride? I'm talking like you're buckled in and they're giving you the ride instructions and you're taxiing down to wherever you need to go to anchor up the first hill. Okay? We're at that point. That's the start of your battle. What's that first pillar? As you're going up the hill and you feel that roller coaster ka-chink right into the track and get pulled up on that little pulley. What are you feeling? And then you slingshot off through the hole, up and down and left and right, and circle, circle, turn, and spin, and spin, and spin, and the battle's over! Oh my god, the buckles comes off, you get off the ride, you're standing there, your legs are on the platform of the ride, and you're like, what just happened? What's your first reaction? For a lot of people, when they get off a roller coaster, it's one of a few things. You're either going to get sick. G-forces. Anyway, you're going to probably laugh because adrenaline. You might cry because adrenaline. What's that other anchor point normally? So very much so, what's going on around them still? Even as the battle is ramping up, going on and bell curving down into a cool down phase, what is going on? Therefore, number 5, battle scenes are never a series of action that the characters just do and repeat like I mentioned before. Look at where there were nearsighted choices, not just in this battle, but previous to, that have been reactions or responses that have negatively affect this battle. Can that come out as a truism in dialogue or narration? Also, how can a character grieve, if need be, from a battle when appropriate? For those of you who don't know, there is a psychological, cycle to grieving. I call it DADBA. D-A-D-B-A. I realized that's what the acronym was literally at my own father's funeral. Dark as it may be. So... DADBA, denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance. It is not linear. A lot of people like to swim in this river. It's not in Egypt. It's within you, called denial. For a very long time. And they normally get stuck cycling between these first 3. Denial, anger, get depressed, reset, I'm in denial again. Angry, depressed, reset. It's normally when you get to bargaining. I want them back. I wish they were here. If only I could have one more moment. Normally this is your return to your spirituality. Back here in the beginning, you're like, God, how dare you take that person from me? But over here, in bargaining, you're a step away from accepting that's what's done is done. You can grieve a lot of things, not just people. Okay? One of the things Ian grieves throughout book 2 is not wearing his sister's necklace because of what he does with it at the end of book 1. Okay? It's sometimes a grieving of a familiarity. Like, for example, if you have someone who's used to being in the military, do they grieve the feeling of wearing their outfit versus their skivvies? Some soldiers do. Some soldiers do. So look at how grief could even apply to like a child losing their favorite toy. Or even an adult losing their favorite toy from childhood that they had kept forever, right? There's still a grief there. So I entice you. Look beyond, I think it's Timon actually who says this. I asked this in a previous video. I thought it was Rafiki. Apparently it's Timon from maybe Lion King 1.5 that says, in response to Rafiki, look beyond what you see. So, yeah, dude, are you looking beyond what is right in front of your character right here? How's your editing going? How's your writing going? Let me know any questions and any concerns or cheering yourself on in the comments below. Above all, take care of yourself. You and your character's voices matter now more than ever. Dang it. See you on the other side.